Hey y'all, it's Angela. Very happy to have you here today. So, at the end of last year, I took a bit of a break from BookTube and really from reading in general because I was having a pretty lackluster reading year slash reading experience, and I really couldn't put my finger on what was making the experience so bad. Perhaps it was, focusing on quantity over quality or something of that nature, but basically, none of the books were really uh, matching my taste, and I just really wasn't enjoying what I was reading. So I decided that for this video, I wanted to challenge myself to only read 5-star books. Not just books with really high average ratings, but every book I read in this video will be 5 stars. Welcome back to 5 seconds later in the video. It's the end of the month for me, and I have 6 books to discuss with y'all in this video. And what was really fun about this whole thing was that each book that I picked up or put in my TBR was a bit of a gamble. So it added this kind of layer, an element of quote unquote danger, maybe, that I can say. But I did try to make this process a little bit more methodical by doing some research before picking these books. So that basically included looking through my Goodreads, doing something I never usually do, which is read a sample of a book before actually starting it and committing to it, and really looking for keywords for my favorite tropes in the synopsis. Rule of thumb was if my eyes were glazing over as I was reading the synopsis, it was automatically disqualified. I did decide before starting all of this that I wanted to read at least 6 books, which I think is appropriately challenging, and also to allow myself to DNF the book up to 50% of the way through, just because I knew there could be some duds and I wanted to give the book a fair shot, but also give myself the grace of just letting it go, just putting it back on the shelf. It's okay, it's fine, the world's not gonna end. So I think that's enough random rambling about my thought process behind this video. Let's get to the actual books that I read. The first book is Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune, and this is a book about a man who unexpectedly dies and is taken to a way station in between death and the afterlife, where he learns more about what it really means to live. I was really looking forward to reading this book, and this was a pretty easy, no-brainer kind of pick for my TBR because I loved The House on the Cerulean Sea, and I figured that things like character and style from the same author would transfer pretty easily from one book to the other, and so because those were the things I enjoyed most from his first book, I really felt confident about this pick in particular. It was really a lovely book, and I'm kind of glad it didn't give me the exact same whimsical, kind of childlike wonder that was inspired by The House on the Cerulean Sea. Rather, I think this one is slightly more solemn, kind of a little bit more mature, since it does focus so heavily on the topic of death and the afterlife and the meaning of life and kind of those topics. It does feel a little bit heavier, but also in a way that makes you just think a bit more, not necessarily feel more depressed. I love the cast of characters. I like the pacing of the plot. I love the slight humor that you get from all the characters, and how even if some people are unlikable, you can't really hate them forever. Still, all those qualities are there in this book, Under the Whispering Door, and I gave it a 5 stars. The next book is Almond by Won Pyeon-son. This follows a boy who has alexithymia, which is basically a condition that makes it very hard for him to feel emotions and recognize it and register it. So he basically just doesn't have any real emotions. He doesn't feel it. Funny thing is, I didn't realize that BTS's Yoongi was reading this book, and obviously the reviews for this book had a lot of BTS fans kind of flooding the comments. That was just kind of a funny coincidence, but this book did make it onto my TBR from some other people's recommendations. I did feel that this was still probably one of the gamblier picks on my TBR, just because it's a bit of not necessarily a character study, but it is very monologue-y from one character, and if you like the character, it's great. If you don't, it's a total miss. And this was also compared to The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which was a book I absolutely did not care for. And so, all in all, I did go into this book with a little bit of trepidation. I did find myself really enjoying the structure of this book. It was very kind of quick and snappy. The chapters were quite short, and so you do kind of move from one scene to the next. There's not really a lot of time to just sit and stew, which is something that I do enjoy when it comes to books that might be a bit harder to get through. And with this character, it actually wasn't that hard to kind of stay in his mindset. This character in Almond, he recognizes that there's something happening. He doesn't quite understand it, but he recognizes that he doesn't understand it and that he's just describing what's happening. And he's just kind of like commenting on, like why he thinks he doesn't understand this, what he thinks it might mean. And just those little insights make this book a lot more of an interesting read. The ending was absolutely crazy. It kind of comes out of nowhere, and that's the part of the book I'm most torn on. I do think that it's a very like high kind of tension note to end on for the book. If I was really critical, I would say this probably lands 4.5 to 5, but as I will mention later, I'm giving this a 5 because I've been trying to reassess the way I rate books. That's a discussion for a little bit later, but the next book is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a memoir about the author's personal experience with domestic abuse in the context of a queer relationship. I read the author's other book, Her Body and Other Parties, last year, and I definitely enjoyed her writing style. That book is a collection of short stories, so I figured combine that with my love for memoirs, it probably was a pretty good pick. I've heard a ton of good things about this book. What was really special about In the Dream House was that it had this almost structural storytelling style, which was really good as a guide in laying out this very personal and often painful narrative in a way that I think gave the author more freedom. There was much more flexibility in these very like out there metaphors that somehow you as a reader still go, I completely understand what the author is trying to say, what kind of image that she's trying to get across, even if she's not directly saying it. And there's also a lot of research actually backed into this memoir about domestic violence in queer relationships, and also the context around how people in the queer community view domestic violence, because it's not something that is quite talked about as upfront as it might be in other communities. And so I think that perspective, and along with the research, really helped tie the book together. This was an excellent book. I gave it 5 stars. I really loved it. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone, obviously, but if you know the context of the books, you've read the trigger warnings, and you really prepare yourself going into reading it and you're okay with it, then I think it's a really, really powerful story that is told in an extremely beautiful way. The next book was Every Note Played by Lisa Genova. This is a book about a pianist who gets diagnosed with ALS, and it's also about his ex-wife who unexpectedly becomes his caregiver. My initial impression of this book was that it would err on the emotional, heartwarming side of kind of medical dramas, and I was also really drawn to the main character, who is a classical musician. If y'all didn't know, which I don't think I've ever mentioned on here, I did train as a classical violinist for about a decade, so it seemed like fun to revisit the classical music performance world. But now after reading the book, I would say that my initial impressions were very wrong, very skewed. This book was the one that I was the closest to DNFing, just because the main character was so unlikable, very cocky and ungrateful, and I thought that the book was trying or going to use this illness as well as his past to try to garner sympathy for a man who honestly, he doesn't deserve it. He did a lot of really crappy things to his wife, to his family, to the people around him. And so I didn't love if that was the direction the book was going to go in. However, I was surprised because you get two points of views, one from the husband pianist as well as from his ex-wife, who is also a pianist. Their stories together paint this really clear picture of a family just falling apart, a couple not considering each other's ambitions and dreams and being really selfish in various stages of their life. And in the end, being forced back together through Richard's diagnosis to work through these things that have just plagued them for their entire life. I ended up finishing the book in maybe 2 reads. I did it through audiobook, which made it a lot easier. And I think I liked it. I finished the book being very invested in their stories, even though we all kind of know how it's going to end. The way that both characters come to terms with their lives and kind of find peace in their past was really significant, and I did enjoy that a lot. Kind of similar to Almond in that if I was being really critical, maybe a 4.5, but because I did enjoy it, it's another 5 stars. The next book I'm really excited to talk about, it's Who is Maud Dixon by Alexandra Andrews. This book is about a woman who becomes an assistant to this very famous author who writes under the pseudonym Maud Dixon. During a tragic accident where the author Maud Dixon disappears and is presumably dead, her assistant, the woman, decides that she's going to pretend to be Maud Dixon. I found that I really enjoy reading about authors, for example, Stephen King's Misery, other examples that I might list over here, but I'm blanking on them right now. But what really drew me into reading this book was the voice of the main character. She's got that very honest, kind of slightly unlikable quality that was very similar to my experience of reading My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh, of reading Mona Awad. So I think if you like books that kind of tend towards that category, you might also enjoy this book. You've got 2 really interesting main characters, Florence, the woman who is the assistant, and the author, Maud Dixon herself, who is a very peculiar lady. I liked how slightly introspective the book was. You build upon each person's history before you really get into the meat of the plot. Like the plot I told you about how she becomes Maud Dixon doesn't really appear until quite a ways into the book, and that is for a very specific reason. While I think this would count in the mystery suspense category, it's like suspense light. So think like literary fiction suspense. You're probably going to see the plot twist coming, but does that mean I enjoyed it any less? No, I enjoyed it immensely. This was a fantastic book, unequivocally 5 stars. Would recommend you read it. And the final book I read was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. This book is set in 1300s China, where a girl whose entire family has basically died, she takes on her brother's identity in an effort to kind of have his destiny, which was predicted to be like great, earth-shattering, just completely changing the destiny of the world. Just from the synopsis, I thought that this would be like a Mulan-esque kind of very light adventure, more on her growing up as a woman, focusing on like that kind of part of being a woman in this very old historical era of China. But boy, was I absolutely wrong. This very, very much reminded me of the Poppy War series, where it's war heavy, action heavy, military strategy focused. The main character, she definitely plays a vital part in shaping the destiny of the world. A ton of stuff happened. I would say that it's less action focused than the Poppy Wars is. And did I enjoy it more because of that? No, I definitely wish there was a little more action, but the selling point of this book for me was the beautiful, beautiful writing style. I generally don't really care, honestly, if a book is written super beautifully. I don't love flowery writing most of the time, but something about the way the imagery of this book, it just like, there are points in the beginning when it's describing the drought that this girl is living through and how it's so hard to find food, and in that environment you can almost feel like the dust coating your lips and you feel parched just like listening to them, and like my stomach was rumbling thinking about them having to like scrape the pot for flavor on their food. It was just very, very vivid, and immediately just like sucks you into the world. And that was something that I hadn't experienced in quite a while. I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. Not sure how long it'll take for it to come out, if I'll even remember what's happened by the time the entire series comes out, but I'm very excited for it. I did love this book and I gave it 5 stars. So if you've been keeping score at home, it seems like all the books I read in this video were 5 stars. And now you might be thinking, Angela, did you just arbitrarily give all these books 5 stars, even though, you know, you did say there were things you didn't like about them? Like, why are you just doing it for this video? Okay, that's kind of the discussion I want to have for this part. Second rambly bit of the video. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I really wanted to just rediscover my love for the reading experience and use the star system as a way to quantify like my experience as I'm reading. If I'm not enjoying it, I DNF it right away. And I think that this whole thing has really helped reshape my view of rating. I've been trying to reshape how I rate and view my ratings. I did want all of these ratings for these books to be based on subjectively how I felt, because sometimes when I read things knowing that I will be sharing them with y'all or posting my review or sending my reviews for like arcs or something, I try to be very objective and look at the structure and like, will this appeal to a lot of people? If I enjoyed it but I see that everyone else was kind of meh about it, should I bring my rating down because it fits more with kind of the general consensus and it kind of like tempers expectations for this book? I have a lot of those kind of extra thoughts when I'm reviewing a book. Through kind of this month, I really wanted to focus on like subjectively, did I enjoy it? And if I enjoyed it, I'm going to give it a great rating. But kind of on that note, I wanted to analyze what my enjoyment of a book meant. A lot of the times, if a book doesn't inspire some sort of like great emotion from me at the end, then I give it a 4 stars, even though I did really enjoy the book. So it's all these little things that I try to be more mindful of to, you know, be a little less picky during my review process. Part of what also made this reading month really successful was just that little bit of extra research that I did for each book that I was bringing in. Like, you know, seeing if my eyes glaze over when I read the synopsis, reading the first few chapters just to see if it kind of appeals to me. Those small things really saved me a lot of kind of time and emotional effort spent on reviewing a book. Obviously, that won't always be the case if I, you know, have books that I want to do for fun video ideas or if there's arcs. But overall, I think it's been really helpful. That's all I have to share with y'all for this video. I read 6 5-star books. It's kind of a rambly video, just wanted to talk about how I'm changing my reading experience and maybe give y'all some good recs for potentially 5-star books that y'all can check out in the future. If you want to see more book content from me, I have my Instagram, Goodreads, as well as Storygraph linked in my description. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all next time.